So we have four wonderful presenters tonight who are going to tell us more about mosses to add to our previous recordings that we've done all about this subject. We are totally inspired by them. And there is Tim Purches, who's from Plymouth and a bryologist and our local expert. He is presenting another 10 mosses. Hi, Tim. And then we have Paula Clark, who works for the National Trust and at Lydford Gorge is one of the places that you work in, isn't it, Paula? And hi, hello. And then we've got Sadie Manning from Beadamoss. Beadamoss is a company that specially grows sphagnum for restoring moors, and we're excited to hear more about how that's done. Hi, Sadie. And finally, we have Chloe Hurst, who's works for the South West Peatland Partnership and is going to introduce us to what they've been getting up to on there in terms of regenerating Dartmoor in this case. So, yeah, we look forward to hearing all of you. I think we'll start off with Tim, and we look forward to hearing the next 10 mosses, Tim.
Okay. Right, thank you for the introduction. I will just share my screen a sec and get my presentation up. And okay, so I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes taking you on another journey from the streets of Plymouth up onto Dartmoor, looking at some of the mosses and liverworts that we will find on the way. So starting off within Plymouth itself, within the urban environment, I first wanted to talk about this moss. It's got a wonderful name, springy turf moss. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a garden and you've got a bit of grass in it, I'm sure you're the sort of person who doesn't put down any sort of herbicide or moss killer or anything like that. And that means you'll very likely have this species growing within your lawn. It seems to really enjoy these sort of shortcut grass that we have in the urban environment. And you can see from this picture, which is taken in my back garden, it can really get quite dominant, really. About 50% of my lawn, to be honest, is this particular species. It's quite an easy one to spot. It's very common in lawns, and as you can see, it's quite a straggly moss with red stems and with the leaves very much curled back on themselves. The next species I wanted to show you is another very urban one. This is common liverwort, and it's a species that likes growing in cracks at the bases of walls, cracks in paving, all sorts of places like that. And it's something to be encouraged. So if you want to do your own bit for the environment that our bryophytes grow in, don't dig this one up. Very easy one to spot again. In the urban environment, you won't see anything quite like this. Those umbrella-like structures are its reproductive parts. They occur in both a male and female form. And you can see from the smaller picture, it's actually got another way of spreading itself around. Those little cup-like structures contain little bundles of cells called gemi. And when a raindrop comes down, it lands in that cup-like structure. It then bounces straight back out again, carrying those little balls of cells with it. And they will then be able to create new plants of this common liverwort elsewhere in your garden or somewhere else. I now wanted to step just outside our homes now and look at our pavements. You wouldn't really think of a pavement as a healthy environment for mosses, but actually there are some species that really do well growing on tarmac. This was a picture I took not far from my home. I reckon there are at least 4 or 5 species in there. I didn't look a lot closer because it's been quite near where I live. I didn't want my neighbours thinking I was even more odd than they probably already do. But the story I wanted to tell you about tarmac, about our pavements, is about these 2 species, Nicholson's beard moss and pointed lattice moss. In the natural environment, they grow alongside by often quite dirty water that contains a lot of silt. And they were relatively uncommon. Nicholson's beard moss in particular was considered to be a really rare species. But then bryologists started to notice that they're growing on pavements and they're growing everywhere. And the beard moss in particular is an incredibly common moss. You'll find it all across all of our pavements, just about everywhere. So these are two species that have really adapted to a different environment, but have managed to make their home really home there quite successfully. Quite why, I don't know. I guess the sort of environment where they live in the wild is quite similar to tarmac in a way, in that it's often being washed over by quite dirty water when we get rain. And now on to woodland. Trees can be a wonderful home for mosses, you can see in this picture here, absolutely covered in various different species. There's a bit of a sad tone to this picture in that that's an ash tree. And as many of you know, we're losing our ashes at quite a rate. So that means we really want to value all of our trees as a useful environment for mosses to grow on. And that even includes our urban trees. Now, in an urban environment, the mosses still have some challenges. They've really benefited from the reduction in acid rain, which I talked about last time, and that's enabled them to spread out much more from their rather restricted range. But they still suffer rather from nitrogen pollution, pollution that comes from car exhausts. So you get a more limited number in the urban environment, but you do get some who really specialise within it. And this marble screw moss is one of those, which, to be honest, I almost exclusively see on trees in urban areas. Really does do quite well. In that larger picture, those little pale green patches are actually gummy, just like you get on the common liverwort, and you can see them in a bit more detail in the inset picture. And again, the rain comes along, it washes these gummy out, and that's how the moss spreads itself around. This species, common tamarisk gross, is one of our most attractive species, I think. That wonderful feathery structure. It's regarded as quite a common moss, but from my experience, you only really find it in quite well-established woodland and quite well-established hedge banks. So it's usually a sign when I see that environment that's been there for quite a while. And it's probably got lots of other interesting mosses growing there as well. I've included a moss with another great name, glittering wood moss, on this slide, because it's the one you could probably mistake for common tamarisk moss. But glittering wood moss is very much a moorland species. You find that up on Dartmoor, whereas common tamarisk moss, it does occur on the moors, but it's also very much a lowland moss as well. One sort of habitat that I think is not appreciated enough, it's not valued enough, is disturbed ground. That is really a very natural habitat. We don't think of ourselves going out and churning up ground in nature reserves. But in the past, when there were large animals around, they would have been turning the ground over all the time, and you would have found quite a lot of disturbed ground. And when I'm going along a path like this, and I can see the bare ground to the left there, I always have a good look. And what I'm looking down in animal burrows created by badgers or rabbits or something like that, for this particular species. And I've missed off the common name for a reason you'll see in a minute. And it's actually quite a small moss. It looks like the pocket mosses I showed you in our first talk, but those little shoots can be really small, about 0.5 millimeter long. But there's a feature that makes it a much more obvious moss. And that's because of a way that it deals with a particular challenge that it has in the habitat that it grows in. It grows in quite low light, so it needs to find a way to make the most of the light that it's got. I need to get a bit technical to explain that. If you look at the bottom right-hand panel in this particular slide, you can see how moss spores, when they land somewhere suitable, they grow into what's called the protonema, which is a thread-like structure. And it's from that the moss shoots grow. Protonema usually dies away, but in this particular species, it's what it uses to cope with the low light conditions. And the cells of the protonema are shaped like lenses, and they collect what light there is, focus it on the chloroplasts at the back of the cell where the photosynthesis takes back. And those chloroplasts, like all other plants, reflect back the green light that they don't use. So when I go to an animal burrow and I shine a light into it, if this particular species of moss is in there, that concentrated green light really reflects back at you. And it's quite a spectacular sight. And it gives this moss its common name which I think is the best common name for any moss we've got. It's called goblin gold.
That's a brilliant name, Tim.
And one more for you, just to finish off. Back onto moorland. I just wanted to show you this one. This is a common moorland moss, common haircap. The haircaps are quite a distinctive group of mosses in that their leaves are quite stiff. With most leaves, the leaves are only one cell thick. But with common haircap, they're quite thick. They're several cells thick, and that makes them quite stiff, and it gives us this bottle brush type of effect. Common haircap, very much a moorland moss. It likes the damp ground. It would appreciate the rewilding that's being done with the sphagnum, and it can get quite big, 20 to 30 centimeters long. And finally, you can see how it gets the name of common haircap from those hairy caps that cover the capsules as they're developing. So thank you for listening to me. I will now stop sharing and hand you back to Naomi.
Thank you so much, Tim. Another 10 beautiful mosses for us. There've been one or two things in the chat, actually, and there was a person there who wanted to grow a little bit of moss indoors because they haven't got any space outdoors. And I wondered what you would say to that. Do you think there's anything one could grow in a tray or in a terrarium, or do you think it's
absolutely? Yes. If someone's got a terrarium or they can make something similar, you can certainly grow your own moss there. And I sometimes do it when I'm trying to identify them. I let them grow on a bit in just a makeshift terrarium just to see what they turn into.
Yeah, and we've had to go in jam jars, upside down jam jars, just telling the person who put in that comment, and we would take a little bit of moss from a bit of pavement and just keep it damp with rainwater and just watch it grow and see what happens. That's a good start. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes.
Anyway, thanks very much. I love that goblin gold. Somebody else told us about that, and one day, hopefully, we'll go and see it.
Well, it's well worth seeing. It's quite spectacular.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Thanks very much to Tim. And we're now going to move on to the moorlands. We finished with the moorlands with Tim and that bank hair cap, which is a wonderful starry moss when you come across it in its clumps. But further on top, you've got the sphagnum, which we heard a bit about last week, and which we're going to be last month, and we're going to be hearing more. And this Chloe Hurst works for the South West Peatland Partnership and is going to show us a little bit about how you're doing your regeneration work. A little introduction to what you get up to, Chloe.
Indeed. Let me just share my screen. So I hope everybody can see that.
It's taking its time to appear to us, but now it has, yes.
Brilliant. There we are. So yes, good evening. My name is Chloe. I am employed by the Dartmoor National Park, but I work for the South West Peatland Partnership. So I'm just going to start off by saying, if I can, it's not flicking through, is it?
Not yet.
Oh, no.
It might do.
Right. It's not my end. Sorry, I'm going to stop and I'll reshare.
Yeah, do.
Let's try this. Okay. That seems to be loading.
Again, it loves to take its time when you want it to. See whether that works.
And I'll flick through. There we go. Sorry, everyone. We always need some sort of technical issue. So I'm going to start off by saying, who are we? So the South West Peatland Partnership is an ongoing collaboration between local and regional government agencies, businesses, charities, landowners, farmers, commoners, and contractors across the southwest of England. It looks like this, 22 organisations, and we are working to restore degraded peatlands across the southwest. So that includes Dartmoor, but also Exmoor, Bodmin Moor, and West Penwith. The project has received £13 million in funding, as part of a 4-year project from 2021 up until 2021 scheme. And we've also received match funding from the Duchy of Cornwall, South West Water and the National Trust, with support in kind coming from many other partners involved as well. But why is this money available and what are we doing with it? Well, looking at the UK as a whole, so the first image here, we have 3 million hectares of peatland, and putting that into perspective for you, 1 football pitch equates to 0.7 hectares. So this is around 10% of the UK area. Globally, peatlands cover little less than 3% of the Earth's surface. There are 3 broad peatland types in the UK. Those are blanket bog, raised bog and fen. And bogs are the most widespread semi-natural habitat in the UK, but blanket bog is globally rare. And the UK holds 13% of the world's blanket bog. Now, they're of international importance, and they'll be what I'll be mainly referring to today. So I'll get on to exactly what peatlands are in a minute, but they are wetlands. So because they need waterlogged conditions to form, we classify them as wetlands. And the second image shows the historic wetland loss in England up to 2008. And as you can see, it's pretty substantial. In the UK, around 80% of all peatlands are degraded, with the greenhouse gas they emit accounting for around 5% of our country's total emissions. So looking at Dartmoor alone in this image, this is research by the University of Exeter. They estimate that less than 1% of Dartmoor's blanket bog is functionally intact. And those are the dark blue bits on the map that you can see, and they're very restricted and isolated. So why is this? Well, peatlands were once industrial landscapes. So over hundreds of years, humans have modified these systems, whether it be for producing food, to harvesting fuel, mineral extraction, or ancient settlements, and the sky in the image, peat cuttings, tin stream valleys, and the list goes on, sadly. This has resulted in a hydrological dysfunction, and you can see in the large image on the right that the peat is drying out and it's eroding into our water supplies, as well as releasing carbon into the atmosphere and accelerating climate change. So the project, the South West Peatland Partnership, is looking to restore these systems, to halt erosion, and to try and restore hydrology back. Which will in turn have benefits for us that I will also get onto at the end. But here's an example of our work. So we've got a before and after here. So the before, so the first image on the left, is quite a wide gully. You can see we've got bare peat hags is what we call them. So those sort of edges where the bare peat is exposed. And they are then susceptible to wind erosion, but also there's quite a high flow. The second image, the after, we've been in there. We've also installed leaky wooden dams to slow the water down and just hold water back for longer. But I'm part of a wider team. So there's project officers, we've got farm advisors, monitoring officer. This is Eddie, our monitoring officer in the corner there, installing a dip well to monitor water table depth. But we've also got, finance, education and comms, because we like to take that holistic approach to the work that we do. But we're just going to talk about what peatlands are and how they form briefly. So at the top of our cross section here, we have our vegetation, or our bog flora. This comprises of plants including bog and hare's tail cotton grass, bog asphodel, sundews, heather. But the main star of the show is sphagnum mosses. Now they form these fantastic carpets, as you can see on the right hand side. They're really beautiful, the vegetation. It also contains the cattertelm, which is where, because of the waterlogged conditions found in peatlands, conditions are anaerobic, which means they're oxygen depleted. So decomposition happens extremely slowly, so slowly that the formation of peat occurs at an average rate of 1 millimetre per year. Very slow growing, but it forms this incredibly rich carbon soil because of that partially decomposed organic matter. But they're also very acidic. So enhanced by the sphagnums, they actually release hydrogen ions in exchange for absorbing things like calcium and magnesium. So they actually help acidify the peatlands. So, they're quite hardy plants, really. And the water table depth, ideally we want it to be 10 to 15 centimetres below the bog surface. surface most of the year round. We do have natural fluctuation, like in summer we get that the water table depth is more than 30 centimetres below that surface. But with the theme of the evening tonight, I wanted just to touch a little more upon the magic plant that is sphagnum. So there are around 30 species in the UK, with over 300 known globally. There are a few different types on my slides here with some little notes to try and help me identify them, but I am no expert. Like, they're actually quite hard to ID, but they're incredibly cool. So they can actually hold up to 20 times their weight in water. They effectively act as a sponge. They were used, they were harvested historically to be used as wound dressings during the World Wars, but also menstrual products as well, because they are so good at absorbing liquids. But they are a key peat forming plant, so we associate them with very healthy functioning peatlands, whereas the dry degraded peatlands that we commonly see now are void of sphagnum, and they're dominated by purple moorgrass or
Well, that's a proper pause, isn't it?
or millennia, which you can see in this next picture here. So it's a very dry grass. It's often very tussocky. It's not very nice to walk on for people that know Dartmoor well. Oh no, can you hear me? Do I keep going?
A little bit, I'm afraid, but keep.
Oh no.
Chloe, maybe try turning your camera off and see if that helps, okay, so that we'll try and conserve.
Yeah, okay, we'll try that. Sorry, I'm quite remote on Dartmoor, so the Wi-Fi is a bit temperamental. So by restoring our peatlands, so doing the work we do and blocking those ditches and reprofiling the gullies, we can halt erosion and hold the water back. And the right-hand image just shows that with the pools that form, sphagnum will colonize extremely quickly. So if the habitat's there, the species will come, and we'll see this shift in vegetation away from the millennia dominated to our lovely peat-forming bog flora. And here's just a couple more examples. Now my slides are not working. Oh no, I'm so sorry, everyone.
No, you've shown us a wonderful array so far of, the story of South West Peatland Partnership, the wonderful sphagnums.
Yeah, well, my slides aren't working, but I can just quickly finish off by saying why we should care and sort of, the benefits that they not only bring to us, but to the wildlife. So I've briefly said about the carbon storage. So they actually store 3 times that of all the world's forests combined. They're huge carbon sinks. So 158,000 hectares on Dartmoor stores around 13 million tons of carbon, but they are emitting these emissions because they are degraded. So yeah, our main priority is to try and halt this erosion. That's sort of the key priority, so we can try and reduce those emissions. But not only that, 70% of the UK's drinking water comes from upland areas, and the crumbly peat we find in these degraded systems, it gets washed with the rain and ends up in our reservoirs as dissolved organic carbon. So DOC is what we refer to it as, which is extremely expensive to remove from our reservoirs, and we as the taxpayer are actually paying for that. Not only this, but water can move much more quickly through these landscapes, and it also enhances flood risks downstream. So healthy peatlands with lots of sphagnum not only holds water back on the landscape for longer, but it also acts as a filter. So sphagnum is great at trapping sediment and other nasty compounds from our water. So the water quality leaving healthy peatlands and restored peatlands are going to be much better, and it will also reduce that flood risk. Just a couple more points. So peatlands also hold secrets to the past, whether it be historic artifacts or also paleo-environmental records. So by restoring our peatlands, we're also helping to preserve that history. And finally, our upland pine, 45%. Species like the curlew that are red listed and globally threatened, they're really missing from these landscapes. So not only is restoration important for us, but this unique habitat needs restoring for them as well, for our wildlife. And it's really great to see livestock, even in the dry summer months, using the water that's being held back by our pools. And that was sort of it. I had one final slide showing some restoration we've done at Hanging Stone Hill, but it's not loading, so I will leave it there and pass on to the next speaker. But thank you.
No, well, thank you, Chloe. And yeah, it's always a bit of a struggle when you're in the middle of Dartmoor. Well, no, anywhere, and you get your tech signal being a bit strange. We've had it a few times. So thank you for persevering. And we still saw some wonderful images of the peatlands, and they're being reminded of their importance and reminded of the role of sphagnum on them, and what you're doing was really interesting as well, and ties it all together, gives our work a bit of a purpose too. So thanks, Chloe.
Great, thank you.
We're moving on to some more about sphagnum, because so far Chloe's been talking about how important it is and what they're doing in terms of, I suppose, natural regeneration. In that way, you know, the damming up the streams coming down and encouraging the formation of wetland which the sphagnum thrives in. Well, Sadie Manning from Beadamoss works there, and they're actually growing it. Well, we'll hear about how they're growing sphagnum and how they're creating rolls of it or hummocks of it or other ways of providing organisations like the Peatland Partnership with material that can actually help restore some of the large areas of land. So thanks, Sadie, for agreeing to present to us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction, Naomi. And actually, I just want to say, Chloe, that was some really great context for what I'm about to say, pretty much, about a kind of an overview of why peatland restoration is so vital. I should try and share my screen. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Oh, I'm on the wrong side. So I just wanted to start with just a little bit of context for anyone who isn't familiar with what we do at Beadamoss, and just give you a bit of an overview of the journey to this point. So we started, the business started up about 35 years ago. Our directors, Neil and Barbara, started the business. They were micro propagating trees and roses and other kind of domestic plant species. And then in the mid-2000s, we were approached by the Mossy Future Partnership with the goal of trying to reintroduce sphagnum mosses into the Peak District, because at the time there was very little sphagnum at all in the peaks, and it's very important, as Chloe mentioned, for kind of system functioning. And so we so we've gone on a bit of a journey since then over the past 15 years to kind of develop the most optimal method for reintroducing sphagnum with the best kind of rate of growth and establishment on kind of in a like an in situ kind of peatland environment. So we started out with what we call beads, which contains the sphagnum propagules, which were suspended in a medium, and they were scattered from helicopters, hand scattered. And then we experimented over time with applying a gel which contained these propagules onto the surface of peat, and then eventually we landed with the beader hummock, which is what we produce now, which is a kind of hand-sized clump of roughly 100 sphagnum strands, which is optimized for hand planting on the moors and can be tailored to the requirements of the site. So the species can be bespoke species mixes can be produced for the requirements of the site. So kind of what is micropropagation really? It's basically all we need is a really small initial sample from a moorland, from a peatland site, of around 10 to 20 strands of sphagnum, which get sent to us, and then we sterilize it and initiate it into the propagation process. And then that initial sample is multiplied and used to produce the species mixes of beader hummock, and they're all grown peat-free in our sustainable glass house, which uses PV panels and ground source heat pumps, and we collect rainwater to use as well. So it's all as sustainable as possible. And the process takes roughly 18 months from the initiation of the sample to supply of a new species mix. But once a species mix is in production, from the point where we get a request for the hummocks, it takes roughly 8 months to produce a large quantity of them. As you can see in this picture, they're supplied in paper rolls. So we supply them in these paper rolls of 20 in bags of 400, and they get sent off and planted on the moorlands. And we produce a number of species mixes, as I said, which are tailored to different requirements. One which is tolerant of more variable hydrological conditions, and then another which has 11 to 12 different species of sphagnum to kind of optimize the biodiversity payoff. And so far, since we started 15 years ago producing the hummocks, we've produced over 11 million of them. For supply to hundreds of different projects, peatland projects across the UK, and also recently in Ireland and Germany, all using locally sourced sphagnum, which we've then multiplied. And we've actually worked with the South West Peat Partnership before, on possibly some of the sites that Chloe mentioned, and with, I guess, variable success due to like novel site conditions, because we work mainly in Yorkshire and the peaks, and it's this different challenges depending on where you're trying to plant sphagnum. So that's kind of a journey that we've been on as well. This is just just to give an indication of the impact of planting micropropagated sphagnum. So this was the Mossy Future pilot site. These pictures are from when we went to visit last year. This is on top of Kinder Scout. The left is their bare peat control site, which so they started doing this restoration work, I think possibly 8 to 10 years ago, and without any intervention to this day, it's still, they say it's like the surface of the moon. And then on the right is areas which have been restored with Beada hummock at a pretty low planting density. And this is over the past 8 years, the sphagnum has fully recolonized. It's just to demonstrate that kind of without any intervention, it does take sometimes decades for sphagnum to recolonize. So it is a step that we encourage people to take if possible, just to speed up the process and the regeneration of their peatlands. And this is just a snapshot of some of the ecosystem service benefits that I think Chloe mentioned a few of them. Kind of most importantly, would be the greenhouse gas benefits of restoring sphagnum on peatlands. And we calculated this using field measurements. It's roughly somewhere between 88 and 110,000 tons of CO2 and we sequestered within 3.5 years of planting sphagnum over a hectare of peatlands. And we're working with Warwick Uni at the moment to investigate the relationship between micropropagated sphagnum and methane. And they found that a higher rate of methanotrophic activity was present in micropropagated sphagnum, meaning that the sphagnum prevents methane emissions from re-wetted peatlands, which is often an issue as well. And then the other big one obviously is biodiversity. Sphagnum is an ecosystem engineer, which means that the quicker that sphagnum can establish on site, the quicker the environmental conditions, like the local conditions, are influenced. So things like the pH and the local temperature of the site, which encourages the development of native species assemblages, so it brings back all of the function of the site. And then the other ecosystem services include like flood management, sediment stabilization, protection against wildfires, and also improvement to water quality in the catchment. And then this is just another slide which reinforces the importance of speed and resilience when restoring a peatland, which I think is arguably the most important factor that the sphagnum provides to a restored site. This graph indicates because the kind of go-to technique for the restoration of peatlands is to restore the hydrology, and then the second stage is often revegetating. But if you stop at rewetting, there will come a point with climate change, a tipping point, where the resilience will be lost, and all of the effort that's been put into restoring those sites will be lost as well. So if you're adding the benefit of sequestration onto that of those avoided emissions, you're providing resilience to the sites. Yeah, so that was just a quick overview of what we do at Beadamoss and why we do it, and some of the benefits that provides to peatlands.
Fabulous, thank you, Sadie. Thank you very much. And that sort of planting with the hummocks is really, really amazing how much of a difference that makes when you give it a little bit of time, but get the right amount of planting per bare area. It's good that you're doing those control areas to see the difference it makes. We have actually been planting very tiny areas. So you were talking about hectares and hectares, hundreds of hectares, thousands of hectares. We've been planting like square meters with community groups with small amounts of sphagnum in fleece nests, and we are about to have a look and see whether any of them are still surviving, because they're so small and the weather has been quite dramatic with heavy rain and then dry suns. So I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation about whether any small scale stuff does work close to communities as well as the large scale stuff that you're supporting with your hummocks.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised how hard it is when we're going on site visits on the moors in the middle of the summer. Last summer when it was 40 degrees, and all of the sphagnum, it dries out at the very, very surface of the hummocks, and then if you stick your hand in it, it's still like perfectly moist inside. And yeah, obviously it survives, it freezes. And so I mean, if you're growing like teeny small amounts, I mean, you'd be surprised how much of it would be able to survive in those conditions. Fingers crossed.
We'll all keep trying. We'll keep going on a creative journey on it, and but we love exchanging with those experts like yourselves who are testing out other ideas, and we can perhaps work together on it. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabi.
No, thank you for turning up and showing everybody how you do it, and those little propagules as well as the hummocks. Next, we've got Jenny, our art and energy, one of our art and energy team here. She's been talking to an artist who and an interested individual who's been inspired by mosses, haven't you, Jenny?
Yeah. So you asked me, Nemi, to talk about the many different people that we've met through the project and their experiences. And there was one lady in particular who came straight to mind, Rebecca. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us this evening because it's her son's carol service at school. So we got together through the power of Zoom when the signal was behaving itself a little better. And I believe Kat's going to share the screen because my signal seems to be rather intermittent this evening as well. I have to say that I am envious of Chloe's mosses over internet signal, seeing as I'm in a town and still not having fantastic signal. So Kat, if you are able to share that video, that would be wonderful. And if not, I'll give it a try.
Hi, Jenny. Yeah, I'm just going to share now.
Brilliant. Thank you.
There we go.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us today. So we've met a few times now at a few different Mossy Carpet workshops, and I wondered what it is that's been drawing you back again.
Well, to start with, I'm from a sort of creative background. So I first heard about Mossy Carpet through an event that you were also at, which was a low profile workshop, which was sewing. So that got my interest when I heard about the mossy carpet through this. I thought, oh yeah, I wonder if that's something that I could really get involved in. So I went to a workshop, and I've never looked back. I'm into moss. I'm into moss in quite a big way now. But initially, it was very much about meeting other people that were of the same, with the same interests, I suppose, and working together on a project which who knows where it's going to lead. And so yeah, I'm a fully converted mossy carpet person.
Have you kind of brought in that before with the low profile workshop? That was very much making and community. Bringing in the environmental message, is that something that's been on your radar before, and something you've joined in with?
I've never necessarily joined in with any kind of events which encompass that, but it's always on your mind, isn't it? You're never far away from thinking, oh, you know, what can I do? What can I do to make a bit of a difference? This sounds awful, but without impacting too much on daily life. So yes, it's made me think about that, and I'm not saying that I've come up with any solutions, but certainly it's something that I want to keep thinking about and actually want to make some changes, but it's just knowing quite where to start, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you said about mosses, so you're spotting mosses when you go out and about now. And
mosses. Now, I've known about mosses. Everybody knows about mosses. You go to Wistman's Woods, and it's just magical, and they are amazing. And so they were sort of on my radar anyway. But when I went to the workshop and heard about just how amazing they are, and the fact that there are so many different types, that's really opened a new door for me, because it's just, I love taking photographs when I go to Dartmoor or wherever, anything that's plants, flowers, trees. So for moss to be on the radar now, I've got something new to focus on, and I've got so many photographs, but I haven't got a clue what any of them are. I just know that they're moss, but I'm sort of inspired to find out more, and to find out how maybe me as an individual could help to restore some of the moss on Dartmoor. So yeah, it's opened up quite a few avenues.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Yes, definitely. Mossy Walk.
Oh yes. So you're coming. Yep. So you're going to meet Tim, and we're hearing from Tim this evening as well. So that's fun.
Lovely. Sorry I couldn't be there tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, for sharing. Thanks, Jenny, for talking to Rebecca and sharing her experience of joining in with this project called the Mossy Carpet. We've actually seen some of her lovely knitted, sewn, collaged mosses, which have been stitched on to the Mossy Carpet overall. And yes, she said she's joining the Moss Walk with Tim Purches, which is one of the crowdfunder rewards. Art and Energy have been running a crowdfunder to raise funds to give tens of thousands of people more free opportunities to join in with things, and as well, and help us make more than 50 meters, which we're then going to share and celebrate later. But I know Chloe or Jenny is going to talk more about that in a minute. I think we have our last speaker, which is someone called Paula. Paula, we've worked with at Lydford Gorge, the National Trust, amazing woodland property in Dartmoor, with our Mossy Carpet, and we asked whether she could talk a bit more about the mosses or managing the woods and some of the sort of ways in which they work. in Lydford Gorge on Dartmoor. So I'll hand over to you and we'll see how the tech works for you, Paula.
Evening, everyone. Hiya. I'm going to stop my video. As much as I'd rather keep it on, I think it might give my bandwidth a bit of a fighting chance. And I will share my screen and hopefully the magical goblins will work their good stuff. Okay. Can you see that? Is it coming through?
It did briefly, and there it is. Yes.
Are we back in the room?
Yes, we are back in the room.
Excellent. Okay, so my name is Paula. I'm the volunteer and community manager for the Dartmoor portfolio of National Trust places, which includes the glorious Lydford Gorge. And this evening, I'm just going to try and give you a bit of an introduction to the magical world of mosses that we have at Lydford and how we look after them. So Lydford Gorge is made up of a stunning temperate rainforest and ancient woodlands. It has cascading waterfalls, fascinating rock formations carved by the River Lyd, and a spectacular deep and steep-sided gorge, which is the deepest in the southwest. Lydford Gorge is owned and managed by the National Trust and has been since 1944. It's a 3-mile length gorge, over 35 metres deep and roughly about 115 acres. It's a really special site, designated as a SSSI for its wildlife, especially its mosses, liverworts, lichens. It's got glorious woodland, a gorge formation, and the rocks are found there, the fossils, and there's fault lines that run through as well. It's steep-sided, it's got fast-flowing river coming through, streams dropping down into the river, has very high humidity, and it makes it a fantastic site for mosses and liverworts, and we have over 185 days of rain a year. Everything is draped in mosses, liverworts and lichens, including the rocks, the trees, the woodland floor, and this is a sign that it is a temperate rainforest. It has a prehistoric feel and it's like walking back in time to millions of years ago. It really is absolutely stunning. So Lydford Gorge is a very special type of woodland, and it's one of only a few areas in the world which is designated as temperate rainforest. The west coast of the UK is just one of those areas that's designated temperate rainforest, and there's other examples in New Zealand, South Australia, parts of America, and in southern Japan. In the UK, areas of Atlantic woodland with very special characteristics are known as temperate rainforest. They're globally rare, found in coastal or upland areas like here on Dartmoor. And what makes it really unusual, it has lots of light reaching the woodland floor, which enables plants and lichens to grow. It has cooler temperatures, a mild climate, and really clean, warm air. So the Gulf Stream plays an important part in that. It's a very old woodland and it's existed for 400 years, and it takes a long time for conditions to become right for the wide range of plants and animals to develop. At Lydford, we've got lots of different types of native trees, including oak and ash, hazel, holly, hawthorn, rowan, and all different ages from young saplings to very old trees. And there's lots of lush growth of mosses, liverworts and lichens and ferns on tree trunks, boulders, the woodland floor, and we've got lots of standing deadwood and dead trees on the floor as well. The streams and rivers provide the boggy ground that we need, and most importantly, there is lots of rain. The amount and frequency of the rain, which with the lots of tree cover, means that the moisture is trapped in the air, which makes the air damp and very humid. All of this makes the temperate rainforest a very special environment and internationally important for our mosses and lichens and liverworts. Now, with on the mosses and liverworts, the ones that are found in the temperate rainforest, like Lydford Gorge, are amongst the most diverse on the planet, and they are really rivaling the tropical rainforests. As I said, Lydford is nationally important. We have rock lichens and uncommon mosses which live in wet too, we had 136 species of mosses and liverworts just at Lydford Gorge. Many of those are rare in the UK and rare in the world and are globally important. So one example is the Hutchins hollywort, liverwort. And they're some of the oldest land plants and have evolved over millions of years. So it's a really precious environment, and it's our responsibility to care for them. Now, big question. Oh, sorry, I'm just showing you some of those examples of what we have at Lydford. Right, so the big question is how we look after this incredibly important landscape. So for many people, when they visit, the gorge appears wild and timeless, and animals are all having an effect on the gorge. It's a living and breathing site, and it's taken, with over centuries at the mercy of the British weather, particularly the Dartmoor. This site can be really tricky because we have to try and get that balance between managing it for nature and protecting the precious species that we find there, but also providing access and opportunities for people to enjoy and connect with nature. Vehicle access is incredibly tricky through the whole of the site, so pretty much all of the work is done by hand and is really hard work. We have a small team of staff. We've only got 3 members of staff within the ranger team, and then we've got about a dozen volunteers who come in regularly to help us do all of our work. And then we have opportunities for community groups of young people, so forth, to come in and help us care for this really special site. We thin the trees to create different ages of trees, and that allows more light to get into the woodland floor. But we do also need to keep a closed tree cover along the river to maintain the humidity level. So it's a real balance. We create and leave lots of dead wood, both standing trees and laying on the ground in whole lengths, to provide lots of habitat for all of the wonderful things that call Lydford home. We also limit the spread of shade by producing trees such as beech and lots of holly. And we like to try and get as much of a range of tree and shrub species as possible. A big part of our work as well is controlling any invasive species such as laurel, rhododendron, and as these cast really heavy shade and they use up the nutrients and change the soil structure. So keeping on top of those is one of our biggest pieces of work. And obviously we're constantly trying to improve our own knowledge and skills through training, surveys, and sharing experience and connecting in with incredible local partners, which is why we were so pleased to join in with the Mossy Carpet work. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Hopefully I didn't disappear into some weird world where you couldn't hear me and I was talking to myself.
No, you did. Thank you very much, Paula. It was great to see some photos of some of the species that are there and to be reminded of all the management that you have to do to maintain the temperate rain, well, manage and regenerate the temperate rainforest, as well as invite people to enjoy it too. So thanks for that. We're nearing the end of our hour of mosses, from pavement to moor and in the moor and how to grow them, as well as another example of a place on Dartmoor. But just before we go, I'm going to hand over to Chloe and see, Chloe, what have we, this is Chloe Uden, our colleague, our art and energy colleague. Chloe, what is going on in the next 2 or 3 days in terms of our project?
So exciting. We are raising money for the Mossy Carpet through a crowdfunder at the moment, and we are trying to raise £55,000 in order to work with 100,000 people across the UK and in Devon, but doing the odd bit around the UK, in order to make 50 metres of the Mossy Carpet, which is a beautiful artwork made by lots of people that we're going to use to celebrate all the tiny things that people are doing in order to respond to the climate and ecological emergency. And we are 2.5K away from reaching our target in 2 days. So we're feeling nervous and excited at the same time, because we really hope that we're going to get there. And we know that we know already that people have been enjoying making it, and we know that it means a lot to people to find their tribe, to find other people who care about moss, who care about responding to the planet's problems, and who want to take action in some way. And so we're hoping that this artwork will bring people together. But so there's all sorts of rewards that people can choose from on the crowdfunder, and one of them is this very special book. There's only 200 of them that exist, and it is called Be More Moss, a Mossylany of Questions for Life, and it's an activity book that has all sorts of wonderful facts about moss and activities to do, and importantly, questions to prompt people's creativity. Now, it is available for free on our website, so if anyone doesn't feel that they have any pennies that they can spare, they can go and have a look at it and print off, or have a look at any of the pages that they want to. But this is an extra special version, because not only is it a really fun thing, but it's been printed in this really lovely way by Ashley House Printers. So we've been searching high and low for a printer that will print in the most environmentally friendly way possible. And this is on recycled paper. It's using vegan and non-chemical inks. We've, as I said, only produced a very small number of them. And the company uses 100% renewable energy for printing and running all of their machinery. So those are very exciting and lovely things that make it even more special. So yeah, that's where we're at. £2,500 to raise in 2 days, and a very cool thing that you can access either for free or buy to support the crowdfunder.
Yeah, that's great. And like I said earlier, that all that money is going to be supporting work with tens of thousands of people, isn't it? And we're really looking forward to the party that we're going to hold in Plymouth in July.
We are. We tried this out the other night, Naomi, at the Wild About Devon Awards, and we had some of those incredible people from around Devon who were doing wonderful restoration work all over Devon come and take their shoes off and walk in socks along a small piece of the carpet, and we had people lying on it and, you know, just really enjoying the feeling of it, and also listening to some of the lovely messages that people have been sending to us.
It is really important, the sharing of eco action. So tonight then we've had mosses from Tim Purches, and now we have 2 films of presentations which covers 20 mosses and liverworts, which is amazing. If we can remember that many, we're doing really well. And then we've had Chloe Hurst talking about the South West Peatland Partnership and the amazing work they're doing all over the Southwest, but all about the peatlands across the UK, followed by information about how Beadamoss, a company in the UK, in England, in the middle of England, is growing moss to help regenerate those peatlands and to lower the carbon emissions, and has an interesting lowering impact on methane emissions as well. And then we had Rebecca talking about how the mosses have inspired her creativity and how she's really thinking about the environment more and wanting to join in more, get a bit more creative. And then finally, we had Paula Clark, who was talking about the National Trust Mossy Landscapes of the Temperate Rainforests in Dartmoor, in a special place called Lydford Gorge. So all in all, a really good hour of Mossylany of inspiration, and thanking everybody on Art and Energy's behalf for helping us join in with this project. And the next one is on the 15th of January, and we are hoping on that day to look at all the little creatures that live in the mosses. So creatures that depend on moss, and you can find in moss, and particularly in around Dartmoor. But we'll see. put it in your diary, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. Bye bye, everybody. It's nice to get a